Good morning, Dan and Amy. It is Martin Luther King Day. Can I share my favorite Martin Luther King speeches? It isn't the best known. It isn't a letter from Birmingham jail. It isn't the I Have a Dream speech. It's actually the speech he gave to a group of junior high students in Philadelphia in October of 1967, so about 6 months before he was assassinated, where he talked about the changing world and the importance of staying in school because opportunities are coming for people who were wrongly denied opportunities. And so stay in school, get the best grades you can, find your path in life, and be the best at it you can, because you're going to be allowed to do that. You should have always been allowed to do that, but the world is changing. Institutional racism is being attacked successfully, and you're not going to be arbitrarily held back by the government from pursuing your dreams anymore. And he said this to these kids. I mean, only Martin Luther King could say this to kids, and it resonates. This is just brilliant rhetoric. He said, "If it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures, sweep streets like Beethoven composed music, sweep streets like Leontine Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera, sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry, sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, 'Here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well.' If you can't be a pine at the top of the hill, be a shrub in the valley. Be the best little shrub on the side of the hill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are." Boy, if we only had such high-minded, powerful, substantive rhetoricians around in our culture and politics today. There are a few, but very few occupy the rarefied space that Martin Luther King did. And, of course, that brings us to the rather dreary back and forth over the weekend between Donald Trump and Georgia Congressman John Lewis, after John Lewis said this about Trump in an interview with Chuck Todd.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be very difficult. I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president.
I don't see President-elect Trump as a legitimate president, said John Lewis, which drew the Twitter ire of Trump, which drew the hysterics of the left. Trump, Bull Connor, Hitler, Nazi. I mean,
it doesn't stop. It goes on and on and on.
That was the language. Marty O'Malley, the former governor of Maryland, former Democrat presidential candidate, tweeting out that Trump had no business criticizing John Lewis. He is beyond reproach, no matter he is a civil rights icon. Nobody's disputing that, but I don't know that means that he gets a pass on everything he says or does for a lifetime. He's still a fallible human being, and he's made a mistake here, as well as for the policies he supported for the intervening 5 decades. Take a look at the urban centers. Take a look at the state of the black family. But O'Malley not only called Trump a Nazi and his supporters Nazis, he said, just as Bonhoeffer resisted the Nazis, just as MLK resisted the KKK, so we shall resist Trump. So it was almost more obscene to compare Marty O'Malley, for Marty O'Malley to compare himself to Bonhoeffer and MLK than it was to call Trump and his supporters Nazis. But, it's difficult to rank the level of obscenities emanating from Marty O'Malley. Well, for more on this flap and the inauguration upcoming this week, we're happy to be joined by Matt Schlapp, who is the chairman of the American Conservative Union and a former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. Matt, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to be with you again.
Good to be with you. Good to have you with us, I should say. And your reaction to this, I guess, unfortunately timed back and forth between John Lewis and Trump.
I hate it. I think it's unfortunate. John Lewis is a hero. He's a civil rights icon. But he also, it was not his best moment when he said Donald Trump is not a legitimate president. I mean, this just is partisan. It's ugly. It's part of the strategy, by the way. This is not like some kind of unique thought in his head. It's part of the strategy that the Democrats are employing to try to destroy the Trump presidency before it even gets started. And I don't see with all that's facing the country, I have absolutely no problem with people being partisan. I have no problem with people having sharp differences. I have a lot of sharp differences with people. It's part of what makes America great. But what also makes America great is just basic respect and decency.
But now it's like a tit for tat. Now John Lewis and other members of Congress, or I think there's 19 of them now, are going to boycott the inauguration. Now Donald Trump canceled on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. He canceled his visit to the African American Smithsonian Museum. So don't you think they should just kiss and make up?
I think, unfortunately, with the way the campaign went over the course of the last year, I don't see the left kissing and making up. I guess we should give the Clintons great credit that they're going to go to the inauguration. I didn't think I would ever say that the Clintons were actually doing something that was responsible and respectful, but compared to their party, I think it's great that they're going. I think it's great that George W. Bush is going. I think for these, like I said, I think John Lewis is a hero and an icon, but for most of these Congress people to just, they're petty, they're small, they can't be the better person, and it's hard for them to just realize that the American people put Donald Trump in to the presidency because basically they see the Obama years as a failure. And they just won't come to that conclusion. They have to believe there's something that just denied them the presidency because they don't believe the American people actually were willing to take the bet on the new guy.
Wall Street Journal op-ed over the weekend, who's afraid of Betsy DeVos? Democrats searching for a cabinet nominee to defeat, and progressive enemy number one is Betsy DeVos, Trump's nominee for education secretary. The nominees, some of which were controversial, like Rex Tillerson, held up pretty well last week. Do you see, is that your handle, that Betsy DeVos is really who they're targeting to try and kind of undermine and perhaps block her confirmation?
Yeah, I mean, she's a threat in every kind of way, right? Which, number one, anybody who knows Betsy DeVos knows that she's very smart. She's very thoughtful. She's very sharp. She's very politically experienced. She is going to be a person who stands up for reform. And the one thing we know in the education community, if you're going to take on the powers of the education lobby, you are going to be demonized. And we've seen that in big cities across the country when you brought in reformers. And Betsy DeVos is up to the challenge. And all she wants to do is make sure that our kids get the best education possible, and that adults get the best education possible, and that people are ready to join the workforce. And once again, there's a Democratic playbook. I don't know if it's like behind lock and key somewhere. They've never let me read it, by the way.
Yeah.
But
you just see it in practice. Playbook. Yeah, right.
And whenever they have a woman or a minority or somebody that breaks into their theme that the Republican Party is nothing but a woman-hating racist entity, they are very threatened by that, and they take those people on. So we shouldn't be surprised, right?
Well,
Yeah.
right, and also, I mean, but the one problem she has, Betsy DeVos, is that she's a billionaire, and you know how Democrats hate female billionaires unless they're named Penny Pritzker.
Right.
Well, it's okay for her to head our Chicago Board of Education.
And be Commerce Secretary.
And I remind people of that all the time, but I think the left is most afraid that DeVos is going to be pushing for school choice.
Yeah, that's right. And, that is such a frightening idea, the idea of school choice. I mean, that could destroy the country, the idea that a poor family could actually decide to send their kid to more than just have the choice of more than just one school. I mean, isn't that that is really going to destroy the country. I mean, when you really break it all down as to what the policies that they're fighting her over, it's like in D.C. The Democrats were able to destroy the D.C. voucher program, where mostly minority kids, mostly African-American kids, had the chance to attend, God forbid, a Catholic school or a private school or a school of the parents' choice. And when you really break all this down, it is tragic. It is tragic that you have union leaders and liberal leaders that are doing everything they can to make it harder for minority families to raise their kids. And, the greatest irony of all, I know we bring it up every time, but when Democrats come to D.C., you could track the new members of Congress. when they have children, they
Mm-hmm.
bring them to D.C., they send them to private schools.
Yeah, and
That's what President Obama did. That's what President Clinton did. I don't blame them for it. I think parents should make the choice they have that they can for their kids. But what if you're a poor family and you don't have all those resources? What is so terrible about the fact that you get choices too?
Yeah, and Chicago, interestingly, half of CPS teachers send their kids to private school. So what do they know? One other topic I wanted to get to you with is where there is some daylight between Trump and the Republican Congress. There seems to be, general collaboration on repealing and replacing Obamacare, on tax policy, although there's a lot of details to be ironed out, on a range of issues. But the one that could be a potential stickler is immigration. And Paul Ryan signaling last week there will be no mass deportations, kind of making that declaration, didn't sit well with some Trump surrogates. And I wonder if this is the area where there is going to be some real consternation between Trump and Republican legislative leaders.
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, immigration is a flashpoint. We all know it because it gets to questions of race immediately. And I think Paul Ryan was trying to use language to not, flame the fires around this topic. And he said, we're not putting together a force to deport people, a deportation force. And, of course, the problem with that, I know what he's saying, which is it's not like some special force is going to be pulled together to, kick these people out in the middle of the night. But by the same token, we do have a deportation force. And we do deport people every day, and we need to. And even in President Obama's 8 years, the left called him the deporter-in-chief because of all of his deportations. President Bush really picked up the deportations at the end of his term. And, we all have to understand that this is a part of securing your border, which is you can't allow people just to come in when they want to come in. It's the country that gets to decide when people come in. So we do have a deportation force. We've had them for decades, and it's appropriate, and there's nothing wrong with it. And the fact is, there's a great moral hazard when you allow people to come into America when they want to, and not when the country decides it's legal for them to come. You create the moral hazard of these families in Central and South America who come through Mexico, and also lots of Mexican families who think that if they can just get to America, that somehow a president will give them citizenship or legal status. And you can see when we have these great, these human tragedies around the border where you literally have children trying to enter the country. This has to stop. I'm a big believer in legal immigration, but I think illegal immigration is going to make it impossible for us to continue to have rigorous legal immigration.
He is Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union, former Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush. Matt, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.